Now, in our previous video, we tackled the exhaust, which was primarily the removal of the exhaust system. And now with that out of the way, what we're going to do is start the next step, which is tackling the fuel system. And by the fuel system, I mean primarily the fuel containment and supply. We're not really going to dive into the carburetors today. I normally remove those as part of the engine disassembly. So for starters, we have a fuel tank back here. We need to ensure that there's no gasoline in it, so we're going to have to drain it. Then we're going to have to remove all the fuel fill accessories, the fuel supply from the rear of the tank, take off the leads to the fuel gauge, the fuel sender, and then drop the tank, and we will then start to pull the lines as they move up the car. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and dive into this removal.
So the first thing we have to do, remove the fuel cap. That'll release any pressure that may or may not have built up. You never know. And then this goes through also. It's going to stink a bit. So we're going to undo this guy first. Now, if you're a stickler for originality, you want to save these or find correct replacements. So we've got that loosened up. With that loose, we should be able to get some rotation on that. And then basically you slide the pipe up and out, and then out through the body of the car. Now from here, you remove this rubber. Sometimes these are really old and need a little help. Now, what you never do is never actually lever against the car body if you can actually help it. What you want to do is you push down and in on the plug to push the whole thing through. Sometimes a second screwdriver is necessary. See, I slipped and I tagged a little bit of the body right there. The other option is you can cut them off. So that's gone. You always want to replace rubber because it gets old and in rough shape. Now there's a second clamp down here at the bottom. Just needs a little longer screwdriver to get that loose. Once you get it loose, rotate it to an easier access point. The cute thing is, you can see that this clamp was in place when this car was painted. So that's loose. So we should just be able to spin that guy off. And now you can see that you got a decent amount of fuel in the tank, which is never a good thing because this stuff is pretty much ancient varnish at this point and does no good to anyone. So the next thing to do is drain it off. Now I'm going to hope that there's not more than whatever will fit in these cans. So I went through here before and I just kind of cleaned off the edges of the bolt so that it would fit on the driver better. Now you see what I'm doing here by stacking the cans. What this allows me to do is, if it's going to fill the first can, it gives me an easy way of sliding that out and having it directly drop into the lower can. So we go ahead and let this drain, and this stuff stinks. It's been in there a long time. So basically, the only way that I know of to safely dispose of this, realistically, is just to let it evaporate. You don't want to pour it into the ground. You don't want to dump it down the sink. The other option, depending on how bad it is you can mix some higher octane gasoline with it and run it through your lawnmower. That That'll allow you to at least use it a bit. And you want to be very careful if you're working in an enclosed area like the garage with this sort of stuff. You don't want to create any sparks. You don't want to do anything foolish like smoke, obviously. And you want to get rid of this as soon as possible. Now, once we get this gas tank out from underneath the car, you actually want to get it out of your garage, because the fumes can cause all sorts of wonderful problems. And it ends up, I did need my second can. So we're going to leave this to drain, and it'll finish working its way out. Let's see if we can get this washer off. No, doesn't want to come off, and I don't want to do anything foolish, so we'll leave this to drain and then come back. The next thing will be to remove the fuel line back here, and then get the bolts around the tank and drop the tank. Okay, so now that we've got the tank all drained, you'll see what I've done is I've dried it up. I've cleaned up the plug a little bit and put the plug back in place. That way if there's any liquid left in there, it won't be dribbling out the bottom while we're working. So in the meantime, I took a flat blade, cleaned up this a little bit just so we could get the proper wrench on it. I've got a 15mm flare wrench, and we are loosening this up. And it's entirely possible, depending on your situation, that this might be pretty well goobered in there. Mine doesn't seem too bad. Got that removed. So it's the main fuel line. So the next step is to start removing all the mountings. So, got a 13mm wrench here on a bunch of extensions. Now, let's make sure we're going the right way here. Now, one of the things I've learned over the years of removing gas tanks that have multiple nut and bolts like these ones do is that if you go around and do every other one, it maximizes the amount of time you don't have to worry about the gas tank falling on you. So we're going to skip that one there. Move over to this guy. So, we're back underneath. We got one bolt on this side and one on this side. What I'm going to do is progressively loosen them so that I don't put too much stress on one side or the other. So this should start to wiggle loose. There we go. Oop. Come off. Now, this is one of the few instances where actually having a bit of a belly can work to your advantage, because you can prop up the tank with all that beer you've been drinking. Alright, bolt is off, and we lower the tank. So we got a disconnect right there, and I'm gonna bring that down. Now we already know that this wiring harness is kaput, so we're not going to retain this, but no point in unnecessarily damaging anything. So this connects to the top. Slide out, there should be enough space. Here you can see the top of the fuel sender. So this guy should just slide off there. Tank is out. Now what you want to do is Immediately take this outside somewhere where the vapors aren't going to collect and cause you trouble down the road.
Okay folks, so at this stage of the game, we've got the whole fuel system out. We started with gas cap, followed by the main supply line and the rubber gasket on the body. Next was the rubber fuel tank elbow with its clips from the boot. Underneath the car, we drained all the old gasoline out of it. We undid the tank, removed the fuel supply line from the back of the tank, disconnected the fuel sender, dropped the tank, set it outside to dry. Once that dries, we're going to pull the fuel sender and any other bits off of that particular tank. We're going to send it out to be boiled. We're a little bit behind on projects and got a bit of a backlog here, so anything we can farm out at the moment seems to be helping us out. We then took out the old fuel system, the old fuel pump, the facet fuel pump with all the rest of the stuff associated with that. We're going to have to order up a new SU pump so that it's period correct and redo a lot of that before we put it back in. Then from there we went along the body of the car. We removed all the clamps that held this master fuel line in place. And then at the very front of the car, off of this line, we removed the two rubber hoses and the fuel filter. Now this was not originally stock, there was not originally a fuel filter up there, so this was added at some point. So fuel filters are definitely a good thing, but the question is, do we put it up there where it's not original? Do we hide it back underneath the rear axle where it's still not original, but at least less visible? So for now, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and send out the tank, test the fuel sender, clean what we've got up. Everything basically, except for the rubber, is reusable in some fashion. We're going to take this fuel line here. We're going to clean this up, which means getting all the gack off the exterior, running a line through it. We're going to check it to see if it's any good before we order a new one, clean up all the little clamps as we go. We will then, once we're done and we've validated the system, we'll store it all away. So through the magic of the internet and videography, the next time you see me, all of this stuff will be handled and we'll have a clean fuel system and we'll talk about that. So at this stage we've completed the restoration of the fuel system for our Austin Healey Sprite project. For starters, we have our fuel tank, which was removed, taken to a shop, boiled out, repainted, and it's ready to go. We have our hardware that we saved, the fuel filler, the clamps, the fuel cap, the sender that we tested, the mounting hardware for the gas tank. And we have the bits that needed to be replaced. We needed a proper fuel pump. Remember, it had a replacement facet pump. So we've got the proper fuel pump now. We also went and picked up all new rubber all the way around. And some new hose clamps and some specialty hoses that are required. So at this stage of the game, we've got absolutely everything. So the next thing to do is just simply package all this stuff up, put it away until we're ready to put the car back together again. That's really basically it. So next we're going to be moving on to another system of the car and repeating this exact same process so that we'll go section by section through the vehicle until we are ready to reassemble.